Hi everybody, I'm Bruce Thomson in Palmerston North, New Zealand, and I've got Nick Sexton in Flagstafff, Arizona, and we've been discussing something from a website called Singularity Hub. Now, Singularity is a university in California that's discussing the most advanced technologies that exist at the moment, and the one we're talking about at the moment is artificial intelligence and robots and where they're going to go in the future. The phenomenon of robots and very advanced artificial intelligence raises some very interesting questions about what it is to be human, what it is to be conscious, what feelings are, and whether a robot could have feelings, free will and not, emotions, that sort of stuff. So I've had a background in creating expert systems in Montreal a long time ago, and I was very interested in AI, artificial intelligence. And Nick has had a background, he works with computers a lot, and he's also had some learning in philosophy, and quite a thinking guy. And we got talking in the text discussion that was going on at the Singularity Hub website, and so we befriended each other, and I thought it'd be great to do a video about our feelings and thoughts about this topic. Most of this will be really to do with the semantics, the meanings of words. And because we have to adjust the words as we discover new computer technologies and robotics, we gain an understanding, a better understanding of these things. So let's start. Nick, you had a question. Let's start from there and see how we go from here.
The first question we have to define is what it means to be human in the first place. Well, prior to this point in history, that was not really a problem. Human was the person across the room from you, wasn't really a big deal. Now, though, we are not only beginning to develop robotic systems that can come very close to mimicking human intelligence, we are very, very close to achieving nanotechnology. And those of you who don't know, nanotechnology is being able to manufacture a chip or a very, very small component on a molecular level. And the implications this has for the definition of what the word human means is that ultimately we will be able to place a chip, so to speak, or a very small device on each neuron, each nerve cell, every synapse in your brain. At that point, all we need to do to be able to get the information that's in your brain out of your brain is develop a transfer mechanism from your brain to a computer. This is not terribly far off. Ray Kurzweil, the pioneer of all this, has now joined forces with Google.
Yeah, he's the chief engineer of Google now, and they took him on because of his knowledge about artificial intelligence and his book, which is How to Create a Mind. So Google is sort of trying to make a mind out of Google itself, searching and gathering and assembling and organizing information. That's why they've got him employed with them. Sorry, Nick, go on.
And what that means is the amount of influence, both financial and technological, that's going towards copying the human brain inside a computer is accelerating rapidly. The United States has a $3 billion program in place to replicate the human brain. The European Union has a similar program in place. This is all coming upon us very, very rapidly. And the implication is, what happens when you copy all the brain waves, all the information inside your brain into a computer? Is that computer program now a copy of you? Or alternately, if instead of copying the information, you move the information from inside your skull to inside a computer chip. Now, which one's you? Your body would be brain dead if that happened. would you still exist inside the computer? And now we come to a point where our definition of what the word human means is becoming a little bit anachronistic. We have to develop new words, new meanings, new syntax to deal with these new phenomena. And it's not easy.
Right.
So it's just, we're dealing with something that nobody in history of humanity has ever been even close to dealing with.
Right, quite right.
And not even close to prepare for how to deal
with
it.
Let me have a go at trying to clarify one or two things. First of all, would you agree that a thing can be to an extent human rather than completely human? And even ourselves, we can be partly human some of the time, or even inhuman, or asleep, in which case our humanity, whatever that might be, is a matter of not absolutely yes, no, on, off. That a dog, for example, can be to some degree human. We'll say, oh, look, he thinks that, and oh, he's feeling sad, or whatever it is. So humanness, the word human, we're talking about semantics here, the meaning of words. It's a word that, without dwelling on it too much, is a bit flexible, and it has a degree. It's not absolutely on or absolutely off. Would you agree with that? It's a quality.
I would say, it is a quality, and it iterates over a lot of different things. For example, when we say someone is inhuman, we generally mean they've committed some sort of atrocity.
That's right. That's right. That's what that word means.
So that's being human in a moral sense. Whereas you wouldn't say someone who lost an arm is suddenly inhuman, even though they've lost a part of their human body.
Right.
And
so just to clarify, that's a good example. What you've said is, if a person is inhuman, then we reject their humanity. And that means that in converse to this, your logic comes in here, that we think that to be human, you need to be kind to people, kind especially to other humans, right? So that's an element of what we call human.
I would say that's part of an element of what we call being human.
And all right then, would you agree with what I supposed before, that there are degrees of that? In other words, there's a whole spectrum between being inhuman and very human. Like maybe you'd call Mother Teresa very human, and you'd call Adolf Hitler less human, more inhuman, right? So there's a spectrum, a scale. Would you agree?
Well, there is a bit of a spectrum, but there is a limit to the spectrum. There is a point at which we respect all humans as members of our species, and we assume that they have human rights regardless of what they've done, regardless of their actions, regardless of their physiology. For example, there's another debate about whether or not certain developmentally disabled people should, what their classification should be. And there's a point at which we need to say people are human regardless of their mental abilities, their physical abilities, their actions.
Right.
And so while there is certainly a spectrum of a serial killer might be considered inhuman, and someone who is very empathetic might be considered more human.
Okay. All right.
There's still a limit at which we say all members of our species are human. And then the sort of spectrum begins from there.
Yeah, what I'm trying to get at here is I have found it very useful to be able to regard all things that exist, everything I can contemplate, as being on a scale rather than absolutely this or absolutely that. And I'm saying everything is qualified. That is, everything is a bit arbitrary or changeable or flexible. Anything at all. You find that as the circumstances change, you modify the amount of a thing, and includes humanity. You could say Mother Teresa or Jesus was very human, and you say, well, Charles Manson, the murderer, a lot of people would say he was inhuman because of the cruelty he did. And you say Adolf Hitler and the guards in the death camps, they became inhuman. And in the circumstances change again. If you release one of these people from those circumstances, their humanity can increase or decrease. So I'm saying it's a good thing, in my discovery of this line of thought, to be able to realize that everything is somewhat flexible in its meaning. It's not absolutely this or that. It's in these circumstances, this is true to this degree. That's what I'm getting at. You see what I'm saying?
I do see what you're saying, but I think there are instances where absolutes are helpful.
Well, okay. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
For example,
I think in general,
yeah.
For example, the instance of developmentally disabled children.
Right.
I think that's an instance where an absolute is helpful to say, regardless of their intelligence or their physical aptitude, they are still human. And I think what we're getting after is a moral definition of humanity, which is distinct from biological.
Yeah, but even the moral definition depends on whatever you're perceiving at the time. For example, let's look at a person who's been injured in an accident and they're on a table and you're saying, do I switch off that person or not? Are they a person still? You still it's very much dependent on these circumstances. If somebody beside them says, I love Jenny, I don't want her to die, I don't care if I have to nurse her for another 20 years as just an immobile person, she's warm, I love her, I want to be able to put my cheek against her in the morning. So the human valuing of that is total. It's depending on the circumstances. In those particular circumstances, somebody says it's human tissue, it carries the symbolism of all the experience I've had with Jenny all that time, I don't want her to die. Somebody else might say, I'm busy, I've got to get to work, turn it off. You know what I mean? Like, depends on the circumstances. And a doctor also, in another circumstance, I won't dwell on this too long, but a doctor might say, you're asking me whether that's human tissue there? Sure it is. Yes, no. So it's not absolute, but it is a useful decision. It's useful to say it's useful to say that is human tissue as compared. No, it's not human tissue. We've defined human tissue as you take a sample of this, you find some of the human genetics in there, you say, yeah, that's human, it's not dog or anything like that. So you can make decisions, but there's no absolute. There's only a decision you will make absolutely. You say yes, or you'll say no. Everything is interpretable, everything is circumstantial, everything has got a bit of a grey in it. There's a phenomena in artificial intelligence called fuzzy logic, and that's what it's based on. So you're familiar with that. A light switch is normally off or on, but again, in the world of semantics, and that's what we're talking about here, in the world of semantics, everything is flexible. You can say that light is down there, therefore it's on, or in the States it's up, isn't it? You have different from New Zealand. Anyway, somebody say that light is on, okay? But somebody could say, an electrician could walk in and say, sorry folks, that's not actually, that switch doesn't work because I've disconnected the power. So everything is qualifiable by all kinds of different things, and it's useful to keep away from absolute yes, no, don't think about it. And this is the very circumstance we're in right now. We're looking at whether robots will ever be human. And just to continue your original question, I'd say if it, it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. And if a robot can behave in ways that make judgments that are wise and useful and helpful to us and that are very beneficial to us and compassionate, then to that extent, in various circumstances, then I would say it was human.
I think you could say the robot was intelligent, but I'd like to make a hypothetical distinction. Right now, humans are the only species that we know of with the mental capacity that we ascribe to ourselves. We don't know of anything else that's intelligent or emotional like humans. But what if there was? What if we ran into some aliens, or if, 100,000 years down the line, another species evolved intelligence?
Right.
such as whales or another form of ape or whatnot. In fact, there were other human or other species existent on Earth in the fossil record, which had larger cranial capacity than we do. Even through some archaeological evidence, we're using fire. Neanderthals, Cro-Magnon, etc., etc.
Right.
Would we call them human?
There
or
we are.
Would we call them, or would we call them a something else? Would we call them a different species?
Well,
regardless of how we treated them,
okay.
we might, if there was a whale, for example, that 100,000 years down the line develops human-like intelligence, we wouldn't call it human. We might recognize that it's another sentient, intelligent being and treat it as such, but we as humans are unique in the universe, and there is something important about semantically acknowledging that. And whether or not we acknowledge other intelligent beings in a way in which we acknowledge other humans, it's important to keep our own distinctiveness. It's not simply a matter of humans are one iteration of intelligence and that's all there is to it. It's a unique experience to be human in a way that it would be a different, unique sort of experience to be a whale with human intelligence or some sort of alien on Alpha Centauri. They would have their own unique culture, their own unique physiology, their own unique means of self-expression that may not even be available to us in any way.
That's right.
So I think it's important to differentiate human from intelligent or even other sentient life forms.
Well, you know what? Can I speak? May I speak?
Oh, yeah.
It sounds as though what you're saying is, and you're probably with 90%, 99% or more of the human population would agree with you, you're saying being a human or not is a question of being in the team I'm in. Right? We're like this, they're like that. Humanity is us, and anything else is questionable and inferior. And to do that, what I'm trying to do is I'm saying, let's examine what being human is. Now, you just said that we're very advanced beyond most other species, and that's probably right. We have notably the ability to reflect. That is, we can look at ourselves and modify our behavior according to what we see when we look at ourselves in various ways. That's a tremendous advantage, to be able to see how you self-correct, know what you're doing, be aware of yourself to a large degree, not entirely by any means, but we are much more aware of ourselves apparently than other animals are. A dog can look at its leg, or you can see that it's bleeding and lick it. So that's, to me, it's a kind of self-awareness. But the kind of self-awareness we have is we can examine ourselves and even examine ourselves examining ourselves. So we have this reflective ability that has advanced us very rapidly and is doing so even more. But I'm coming back to this idea of human or not. I'm trying to get away from the idea that you have to be in a presently labelled human tissue body, a biological body, to exhibit the things that we value as human. Now, we've just agreed that one way of calling a person human or inhuman is their generosity, their collaboration with other humans or even animals. St. Francis of Assisi would be saying, oh, he's a very human guy. He's the opposite of inhuman. He cared not only for humans, he cared for dogs and cats and animals like that. So we've just identified, would you agree, one element of what we call human to be generosity, kindness, and that sort of thing, right?
Exactly, and I would agree that's one element among many.
Yeah.
And I certainly agree that other hypothetical, or at least hypothetical right now, species could share these traits. But I think it's also important to remember that that's only one trait among many.
I agree.
That
but let
make
me
up what it truly
means I agree.
to be human.
Yeah, okay. Now, one thing I'd like to ask you is, do you think it's a matter of valuing a person as human or not? Because we do. If a person, the more human a person is, the more highly we rank them in the nature of all the universe. We say, to be human is very valuable. I'm human, therefore I value myself. It's built into us. And you perceive another thing, in as much as it seems to be human, we value it accordingly. We value it more or less. We value dogs because they're man's best friend. A cat, some people would say they're sort of man's best friend too. A rabbit, you don't quite value the same. You have it as a pet. An ant, because it's like humans, is valued for its collaborative and very human-like thing. So we'd say collaborative ability seems to be a human trait that we identify with and we embrace, and we say that's it. Not only should this thing be generous and kind, but cooperation with others in an organized way to get things done, that's a thing that humans value as being part of their humanness too. So what I'm saying is we're looking at the elements of humanity here, and what do you think of that?
I think you could pretty safely say that collaboration is an element of humanity that makes up what it means to be human.
Okay.
But at the same time, if you had someone who chose to remove themselves from society, like for example a monk, or a monastic or a stylite, etc., they don't cease to be human merely because they cease to collaborate. And in the same manner, if you have someone who doesn't remove himself from society and still doesn't collaborate, like a criminal or something, they still don't cease to retain their humanity.
No, but would you agree, though?
Usually they have ceased to maintain some aspect.
Okay. But what I'd like to come back to an original question I asked you. Do you allow that there are degrees of humanity assigned by us to any individual or any group? And I'm saying is it a yes, no, they're human, they're not human? Or is it a question that kind of person on the operating table or in a hospital bed, or that monk who went away and didn't all his life just didn't socialize with anyone, is there a degree of humanness, or do you want to make it a yes, no, they're either human or they're not? Because I think that's where your puzzlement comes from, is that you are not yet willing to say humanity is a by degree thing and by circumstance thing.
I think it's a mistake to... I think although there definitely is a spectrum of degrees of humanity, I think it's a mistake to extend that spectrum too much, because at that point we run the risk of dehumanizing people and saying, well, this person is so far down on the spectrum that they don't deserve to be called human anymore. They don't deserve their human rights. They don't deserve the essential respect.
But all right, but hang on. But we are stuck with that, aren't we? On the hospital bed, every day somewhere in the world, we're stuck with having to make that decision. And what we do is we say, even though they're human tissue, they're totally not functional, they're not suffering, they're never going to be anything, we're going to turn off that switch. We're stuck with that. Even if they're human, we're still going to terminate them.
But we don't know that they're never going to wake up from a coma again.
But we do turn off that switch, don't we?
Well, I believe that's a mistake.
Okay, always. You say always.
Case,
Okay.
I believe that sometimes it may be justified to turn off the switch due to triage. It's more important to use these medical resources to treat these people who have a very, very good chance of survival, as opposed to treat this coma patient who has a 1 in 100 chance of waking up from a coma. That may be a triage justification, but it's not an absolute moral justification. Assuming medical resources are not the problem, there would be no reason to ever turn anyone off, because they might wake up from a coma. There have been brain-dead coma patients who have woke. So I would have to say there is no moral justification from turning off a coma patient, aside from triage. Aside from, we have these resources that are limited. Right. They are put to better use here because this coma patient is is it's more of it's an analysis of probability. This patient has a good probability to live the treatment. This patient
Yeah,
has a poor probability.
Okay. Let me approach.
So there is a moral aspect.
Yeah, sure.
Overwritten.
Yeah, okay. Let me approach it from another point of view. You minute ago you talked about Cro-Magnon man, Neanderthal man, or humans evolving over time, and we came supposedly it seems science tells us we came from apes and we evolved over time. Do you think that at one point a light bulb came on and say, now they're human? Or do you think our humanity, in terms of what I think human is, changed over time? We became more and more what we would call today a human.
It's a very interesting question. I think the degree of separation from a human and an ape. Now this may be more of a radical position than some people would care to accept. But I believe that the degree of separation from a human and a lower ape would be only a degree of intelligence. And in the same manner, the level of separation from a human or a Neanderthal or Cro-Magnon, etc., would only be one of intelligence. And you might be forced to accept some more radical, perhaps not radical, but some more unusual positions on the rights of animals and the respect that we should give to animals as a result of that sort of a conclusion.
Okay, well, are you saying then that you would agree that there is a spectrum of humanity, evolutionary speaking?
The human body has evolved relatively little since the era of cavemen. The human brain has evolved relatively little since the era of cavemen. What has evolved quite a bit is our collective culture, our collective understanding, our collective consciousness. If you will.
Okay, so what you're saying, just let me interrupt for a second here. Let me interrupt just for a second. What you're saying is, you would agree that even earlier than Cro-Magnon or other kinds of humans, kinds of animal, there was a whole spectrum right back to sort of rabbity animal that most people say that's nowhere near human, what I'd call a human. But we evolved from that through history, and the paleontology and science indicates that involved somewhere along the line. What I'm proposing is that it seems sensible to say that was a spectrum of evolution, body and mind, that arrived at between something that definitely we'd say wasn't human to something that was human. Even from the beginning of time, the first molecular forms that formed genetic material that could replicate, right up to what we've got now and extending into the future, could be said to be a spectrum of evolution or advancement into more and more humanity. True?
When you say evolving towards more and more humanity,
right,
that seems to be implying that humanity is the endpoint of biological evolution, and that it's less of a spectrum and more of a progression.
Yes, fine. Either word's fine by me.
Okay.
My main point is, although we do now and again say, yeah, that's human and that's not human, there are many circumstances where we'd say, well, it sort of became human. It was over a period of time that it became that. I'm trying to get away from the idea of, yes, it's human, no, it's not. Let's not think about it. What we're trying to do here is find out, what is humanity? What is the commodity? What is it? We've agreed a minute ago that if it looks like us, then we tend to say it's human. If it's generous, we seem to be thinking it's human. If it can think the way we do and reflect, especially reflect on things and interact cooperatively with other humans, then those are commodities or features that we say that assigns it a level of humanity as compared with not having those things. So we have already discovered several features that we say that contributes to the so-called humanity of the thing. So we are making progress here. I'm just hoping that you would see that everything is on a scale and depending on a circumstance, and we've just talked about the evolution from one-celled animals right up to humans as they are and extending into the future. We're saying these are the qualities that tend to make us feel that is humanness. It's not yes, no, they look like they've got 2 eyes and 2 feet and walk around. That's enough. We're having to look more deeply than that. We're having to say, well, now we've got these robots behaving a bit like humans. Are they? And that's what we're discussing here. And I'm saying, my position is that these new beings, the robots, the more advanced ones, are becoming, that they are demonstrating the same features that we value as human. And I would say, in as much as they do that, they are human. They're not absolutely human like a human being, but in as much as they do that, it seems reasonable to me to say that they are human. Same as way we value a dog. We don't say it's totally human, but in many ways it is human. We relate to it, we love it, sometimes we hate it, whatever it is, but it's behaving, in as much as it behaves like a human, we let it in our house and we feed it, and we treat it like a child. So I'm just saying there is degrees of this thing, and I think by looking at what the degrees are and specifically what the components of the recognition are, that way can we examine what humanity is, whether robots and AI, how far they can be human, and very usefully, what do we want humanity to be? And we design it. We can get more of it. We can change the AI so that it can recognize better the expression on a human face in a person in a hospital, for example, and give them care. If they seem to be in pain, then if the robot can say, "Ooh, I've got to provide some more morphine there because that person's suffering." That's a sort of a human judgment. We've programmed it in, and sure enough, it's artificial, and we'll talk about that more. But I'm just saying, humanity to me is a multifaceted, multi-featured thing. Every feature has got a linear scale of being true or not being true, or level or degree. That's my point. And I find that that's greatly helpful when you're talking about these new phenomena. You analyze them down to what the components are and the degree of them and the circumstances that they apply and what we want of them. We want more of them, less of them. Do we want to dismiss them? Whatever it is. Same as when you're looking at that very handicapped person or the person in the hospital bed, you're saying the valuing of this being is important now, because with that money that we're spending to keep them at $100 a day or $300 a day to keep them in that bed alive, we could be saving lives in the neonatal, the obstetrics division. So we have to make decisions. We say, we will say that the neonate, that breech birth babe, that's may not be able to save them, but if we have an MMR that can see how it's twisting in the utero, that will help us do that. We'll rescue that baby. It'll have a life. But this is a man aged 60. He's lived a life. He doesn't have dependence. He can't sense anything and never will, as far as we know. There could be breakthroughs in science, but this neonate needs the care now, needs that machine. So we make that decision. So we judge the level of humanness rather than absolutely yes they are not. We're saying the neonate is more valuable.
I think it's a little bit, this is more of a discussion of semantics.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Confusing to use the word human when applying it to members of other species, like a dog or a rat, or for example. I think that's more confusing
Okay.
than saying, because the dog is obviously not human, even though it may exhibit some characteristics that it shares with humans. We don't say the dog is human. We might still care for the dog, just as we might care for a human, or almost as much as we might care for a human. But we don't literally call the dog human or say it exhibits human characteristics. We say it exhibits characteristics that it shares with humans. And I think that's perhaps a subtle difference, but I think it's important.
Okay, well, hang on. What you're saying is then that, for example, generosity, human generosity, cannot be given to a dog. You cannot say a dog cares, for example.
Well,
You're saying only a human can care. To me, that is a kind of bigotry. That is a human bigotry.
That's not. Perhaps I should have been a little more clear. I would say that both a human and a dog can share the characteristic of caring, which is independent from either humans or dogs.
Yeah.
So they could both possess that characteristic.
Right.
Whereas I just think that's linguistically a less confusing way of approaching the issue of how humans and dogs share certain features than saying it's an anthropomorphic feature. Did I say that right? Anthropomorphic feature. Saying that dogs possess this characteristic, this human characteristic, which is caring. Rather, you would define caring as something separate that both humans and dogs possess.
Yeah, but do you agree that humanness is made up of characteristics? Before you personally or anyone would say that is human or that is not human, you examine characteristics, or what, I can't remember the word you used a second ago, but you said characteristics or features of a dog or a human. They are what enable you to decide that's human or that's not. So humanity or humanness is made up of components that you judge and look at the degree of them and you say, yep, that's human, no it's not. Right? You agree?
Yeah, I think I'd agree.
So that's interesting, because that's a step forward. That means that you are willing to judge humanness in accordance with some parameters. You're not saying, well, I feel a human. You're being now thoughtful about it. You're saying that is to this degree in these circumstances human. And also you've let go of the idea that a feature such as cooperativeness or kindness or protectiveness of young is exclusively human. We own it and nobody else can have it.
No.
You see,
yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
I believe it's more clear, provides more clarity to say that things like cooperativeness, kindness, protecting the young, etc., are not defined in their relationship to how humans exhibit those characteristics, but are instead defined separately.
All right, so we've agreed then that it's a humanness is a bunch of characteristics.
Yes.
All right, good. So that means that if another thing, whatever it might be, a dog or a cat or a robot, if it manifests those equally or even better, let's say less or equal or more than a human, it is then that much less or that much equal to or that much more than a human.
I think that definition is just a little too simple, because I think there are certain characteristics that are intrinsic to being human.
Okay.
And certain characteristics that are not.
Right.
For example,
I agree.
if I was born with four fingers I would not be considered inhuman. Whereas if I was born without, is it difficult to think of something I could be born without that would qualify me as not human? I would have to be born a member of a different species to not be qualified as human.
Okay.
And I think membership in the human species, perhaps as defined by genetics, is one of the is perhaps not the only intrinsic quality, but is one of the intrinsic qualities of being human.
Yeah, yeah.
And that doesn't
Yeah.
that other non-human beings, such as
Yeah.
a dog or
Yeah.
a robot or an alien, etc., could in principle not exhibit some of these non-intrinsic traits. For example,
Right.
they could be kind or generous, etc. But they couldn't be human.
Okay, so let's talk about
They-
we've agreed that the bundle of characteristics that we label human can be owned also by other things, and in as much as those other things, a dog, cat, or a cockroach, or a robot, AI, whatever, in as much as they demonstrate them, we'd say, yep, to that degree they're human. They're not equivalent to a human, but they are behaving in human ways. Right? You agree with that?
Well, I want to reverse that a little bit and say that rather than, let's say we have a dog exhibiting caring behavior,
Yeah.
kind behavior. A dog sees his owner falling into a lake and can't swim, and he grabs him by the teeth and pulls him out by swimming. And we say that's a kind or heroic characteristic.
Right.
And I think it will be more helpful to define a trait such as heroism separately from humanity,
Okay.
rather than say only humans are heroic, and
Yeah.
insofar as other things are heroic, they are
Okay.
like humans.
No, that's good. So what you've
I think
yeah. What you're saying is, we've agreed now that humanity is made up of a whole bunch of characteristics, and while we're at it, we might as well say, well, we're not going to say that those characteristics are exclusively owned by humans. They are also owned to some degree by other beings. So we've agreed on that, and that each of those features can exist to a degree, more or less heroism, more or less cooperativeness, that sort of thing. So we've got a whole lot of characteristics, and this is very good. To have arrived here is very good, because then we can look at what we're valuing. These things we're talking about, these characteristics, the ability to reflect, the ability to process information, be clever, be intelligent, those sorts of things. They are very valuable things, and when I say valuable, I mean we value them. Each of those characteristics that we're talking about, we're not talking about for no purpose. We're talking about them because they are valuable to us, to other humans, and even to the dog or anything. They are characteristics that are important for survival and progress and that sort of thing. So now when an artificially made being displays those, to that degree, would you say it can be, to that degree, in that sense, in those circumstances, human?
Again, I think it's confusing to refer to things that are obviously not humans as human. Rather, I still think it would provide more clarity to say that the robot exhibits trait XYZ, insofar as it exhibits trait XYZ, and there are certain traits, the human genetic code, for example,
Yeah.
human physiology,
Yeah.
that a robot cannot exhibit.
But
Even if it
okay.
has equivalent robots, even if it has 5 fingers.
But
on
why?
each hand.
Yeah, but why are you so reluctant to say that a robot is acting in a human way? You seem to be very reluctant to say robots are human, even to a degree. You shy away as soon as I say they are human to a degree. You shy right away. No. They're them. I'm me.
Well, because I think that traits such as kindness or heroism or generosity are not exclusive to just humanity. Animals can act in these ways.
Right.
We could program the robot to act in these ways. So rather than saying kindness is a human trait, and we can project that human kindness onto an animal or a robot, etc., or an alien, etc., you instead define kindness as its own traits
Right.
that humans exhibit
Right.
in their
Right.
own way, that a dog might exhibit in its own way, that a robot may be conceivable that it could exhibit it in its own way, or another life form on another planet orbiting a different star right now could be exhibiting in its own way.
All right.
So
Let me
rather
ask you a
than
question.
saying the robot is, well, let's finish this real quick. Rather than saying the robot is like human, we would just say the robot is kind, for example.
Right.
Because we're moving away from projecting our own version of kindness onto other things, and instead moving towards more of a universal definition of kindness
Right.
that sort of
Yeah.
is exhibited by
Right. Right.
other things.
Yeah.
We don't say a headlight is like a lamp because the headlight produces light almost like a lamp does. Rather, we say both the headlight and a lamp have the property of producing light, and they produce light in their own distinct and unique and separate ways. And
Right.
that is what I really want to bring out, is that the way a dog exhibits kindness, or the way a robot may potentially in the future, or the not so distant future, exhibit kindness, is different from the way a human would exhibit kindness. Maybe not different in a practical way, but still different in a meaningful way. In the same way that let's say we have two different artists in two vastly disparate cultures, and they both want to create a piece of art that exhibits the emotion of anger.
Right.
Both pieces of art are going to be incredibly different because one is Chinese and the other is in an African tribe.
Right.
Both pieces of art are going to be incredibly different.
Right.
They won't look anything alike,
Sure.
yet they will still express the same thing, which
Right.
is the emotion of anger.
Right.
And I think that's really, I would just really think it would provide more clarity to say humans exhibit kindness in a human way. Dogs exhibit kindness in a dog-like way. And though that might look a little different, it might not be practical, it might not be different in any practical sense, yet it's still different. And some sort of extraterrestrial life form, whether they're as intelligent as we are or not, or more so intelligent, would exhibit kindness in their own way. And a robot, if it were so programmed, may exhibit kindness which may or may not be possible. Exhibit kindness in a robot way, and these are all different sorts of things.
Okay. Well, all right. Are you saying?
Okay.
Are you saying that the kind behavior is superior because it is being done by a biological human body?
I think that as humans are higher on the developmental spectrum than dogs, you could make an argument that human kindness is more advanced than dog kindness. I don't know if that's self-evident, that that's true.
And hang on, just interrupt for a second. If you are the one being taken out of the lake by the dog, compared with a human, does it make any difference? It doesn't make any difference in that circumstance. In that circumstance,
you can make an argument. Not that I would necessarily. I don't know if I would necessarily agree with that argument. I'm just saying that the argument might be made. Now, as far as the robot goes, kindness is, as far as we know, affiliated with an emotion. And as far as we know, programs are incapable of either generating emotion or feeling emotion, etc., etc. Programs are incapable of receiving.
All right, now
or
let's.
generating
Yeah, that's our next
Or,
question.
right.
Yeah, that's our next question. But let's stay for a moment with the dog rescuing me or you from a lake,
Right.
as compared with a human rescuing me or you from a lake. Now, consider this. This time it's a robot that does it, and it does it in even more effective way, keeping your head above the water better, doing resuscitation in the process. It brings you out better. Now what I'm saying is, who cares whether it's human? What we're looking at here is the result. Now you might in other contexts value the human far more. If you want to go to have a coffee with them, fine, but in that circumstance, for that period of time, in that way, the rescue, which is the primary focus, is better done by the dog is probably not as good as another human. A robot could be superior to a human. And I'm saying I don't care whether they're human or not, and I don't think many other people would as well. I think they'd say, well, fine, the robot, I can't cuddle the human or take them to a coffee, but wow, did they do a great job rescuing the person from the water. I'm saying that our humanity is significant to be distinct, because it's a bundle of characteristics to lesser or greater degree that we value highly. But I'm saying if a robot does those things, then it is more valuable in that circumstance, and you could even say more human in terms of the things that matter in that circumstance, than a human is.
Now we are talking about a very separate question. Originally we were talking about kindness, and how a human expresses kindness differently than a dog expresses kindness differently than a human. We're not talking about value. Of course the robot is more valuable because it can perform better than you. The question we're asking is the robot exhibiting kindness?
Well, I mean, if you, again,
so
you got to...
It's a different question.
Yeah, sure it is. But
we might be more interested in the robot. The robot might be able to do everything better than a human.
Right.
But that's not the word that's under discussion.
I'm not talking about the absolute. I'm not talking about the absolute, all surrounding totality of the robot. I'm talking about the behaviour in the circumstance, to the degree that it is manifested, is valued. You a moment ago you shied away from using the word value. I think the word valuing is very important here, because I think that at the moment you and nearly all of humanity value humans without even thinking about that much, automatically greater than other beings. For example, and I have online, as you know, compared it with racism. There's been times when people who are in less developed cultures were devalued so much, people think they can't feel, they can't think, we can do what we like with them, make them slaves and that sort of thing. I think that the attitude of humans towards robots and AI is like that. It's just understandable. We are them, they're not like us, they're just less valuable. But what we're looking at now is kinds of being, robots and AI, that can be better by far than humans in some circumstances, not in their totality. I'm just saying in circumstances they can give us even more than what a human will, and therefore I would say they need to be valued in those circumstances to that degree higher than a human.
I agree that I would value one, that if I was lost in the woods, for example, I would value one drone, one rescue drone.
Yeah, right.
100 orders of magnitude more.
Right.
Than an entire search party of humans and dogs.
Yeah.
Because they have to walk very, very slowly.
Right.
It's going to take them forever to find me.
Yeah.
Whereas the drone is going to find me in 5 minutes, and it's going to drop me a granola bar and put my coordinates into the rescue team with the truck, or maybe just an automatic truck.
Right.
And just
Sure.
drive right out to where I am, and then we're all done.
Yeah.
Robots can be in orders of magnitude more valuable than humans in certain situations.
Right.
I don't think that's under dispute by anybody.
Right.
What I think is in dispute is, do robots in fact share the same set of characteristics, minus genetics, of course, that make us human? Do they in fact share that set of characteristics, regardless of whether we think they do? Regardless of the popular opinion on, oh, they do have emotions or they don't. Which, I believe what's in dispute is, which of those characteristics that define what human is do or can robots share? One of those characteristics, we've agreed, is kindness, empathy. We've agreed that kindness or empathy is that rather than being based on the human experience of kindness or empathy, is a separate thing that humans express, animals express, maybe other forms of life express, maybe robots could express.
Sure. So we don't own it. You're agreeing that animals, because other animals manifest these various behaviors that we value, that we humans don't own those things. We don't own them. We exhibit them.
Exactly.
Okay. So.
Yes, I fully agree with that statement.
Okay. Now, if so, what you've done is you've brought us to the next part of this, and that is whether or not the intention of the robot is the same as ours, its sensations and so on. What I'd like to do is stop the video now and have another one, and we'll continue on that topic. Is that right?
Sounds good.
All right.